Well, the countdown is on to the midterm elections, and right now, the dam, it's breaking. What I mean by that is every poll is surging for Republicans, and every indicator is that the red wave will be a lot bigger than most people predicted. I'm standing with my prediction of more than an average red wave. I'm going to say 35 plus seats in the House, 2 to 5 seats in the Senate. That's what I've said recently. But as you know now, back in June, I said more than 50 seats in the House and 5 seats in the Senate would go to the Republicans. I'm going to stick with that prediction because during the long days of summer, things in America have certainly not improved under the weight of Joe Biden's failing mental capacity and plethora of failing policies. And that was proven again last night as President Biden gave another speech about the threats to our democracy. Because the first one worked out so very well, he decided to do it again. Here he is. This was the main thrust, by the way, of his argument. Here he is last night. If you missed it just like everyone else. Here's what he had to say. Listen.
But something else at stake. Democracy itself. I'm not the only one who sees it. Recent polls have shown that overwhelming majority of Americans believe our democracy is at risk, that our democracy is under threat. They too see that democracy is on the ballot this year, and they're deeply concerned about it.
New drinking game, all right? You take a shot whenever a Democrat says democracy under threat. You'd be unconscious after watching that 20-second clip. Right before the midterms, the president is giving a speech saying that literally democracy is on the ballot. And that means if you vote Republican, you're voting against America somehow. But they don't explain how. Yes, instead of talking about the things that Americans care about, things like inflation, parental rights, crime, all he can run on is Republicans are bad. They'll destroy democracy. Yet, in an ironic twist, the Democrats, including the president, are the very people undermining democracy itself by creating mistrust in our elections. It's almost like that's what they want to do is undermine democracy. That's why they keep talking about it. They put it out there. It's a talking point. It's a bullet point over and over and over. For example, here's President Biden on the 2020 election. Listen.
The great irony about the 2020 election is that it's the most attacked election in our history. And yet, there's no election in our history that we can be more certain of its results.
From a purely factual standpoint, that's not true. The most attacked election of all time was 1876. But hey, he should know that. He was there. But I digress. First of all, I'm not sure what the 2020 election is, but if he's talking about the 2020 election, well, that's not true. I'm not alleging China or Russia hacked the election in some kind of grand scheme like the Democrats say happened in 2016, by the way. But there are certainly legitimate questions about voter fraud, especially with millions and millions of mail-in ballots flooding the country, something Democrats are trying to continue as long as possible, forever they'd like. And they're trying to normalize waiting days and days and days for the election results, which the media have backed them on. Again, does that strike you as a way to make elections safer? It at least lends the appearance that something's fishy if one candidate is up and then a few days later the other candidate has found just enough ballots to eke out a win again. I mean, listen to the president here.
We know that more and more ballots are cast in early voting or by mail in America. We know that many states don't start counting those ballots till after the polls close on November 8th. That means in some cases we won't know the winner of the election for a few days after the election. It takes time to count all legitimate ballots in a legal and orderly manner. It's always been important for citizens in democracy to be informed and engaged. Now it's important for citizens to be patient as well. That's how it's supposed to work.
The thing is, that's not how it's supposed to work. This is not normal. They're trying to normalize the thing that is not normal. We've always had an election day in America. Long before we had these computers counting, we had to count ballots by hand in this country. So why can't we count all the ballots on a single day that we call Election Day? There's no reason at all we shouldn't be able to get it done. We live in the most high-tech world ever, where hundreds of millions of people can buy random lottery numbers and they know instantly who won And who didn't? But they can't figure out the voting? Come on. Unless someone's trying to do something nefarious, at the very least, it leaves open the possibility for someone to cheat. And tell me, how does that give the American people any confidence at all in this system at all? So here's the real issue. The Democrats are trying to demoralize you. That's why they are saying the 2020 election was the most secure in history, which you know better. That's why they're extending Election Day into Election Week and Election Month now. Where I live, they vote for 6 weeks. Some are certainly trying to cheat. But the real reason is to make you lose faith, just enough, that maybe you'll just stay home and say, you know what, my vote doesn't matter. And when you do that, guess what? They win. So, keep your chin up there, buckaroo. Don't become demoralized. Do not let America's elite and the WEF, the World Monetary Fund, and all these other clowns that all are representing the Democrat Party do what they're trying to do, and that's gaslight you into sitting home and not participating. But that's not all the president did. He also continued his attacks on Republicans, demonizing Trump supporters as trying to subvert the electoral process. Of course he did. Even though that is what President Biden is doing right now in front of everyone. Listen.
Is trying to succeed where they failed in 2020, to suppress the right of voters and subvert the electoral system itself. That means denying your right to vote and deciding whether your vote even counts. Instead of waiting until an election is over, they're starting well before it. They're starting now. They've emboldened violence and intimidation of voters and election officials. It's estimated that there are more than 300 election deniers on the ballot all across America this year.
Name one person, just one, that's been denied the right to vote in America this year. Show me a person who's been disenfranchised and forced to not vote. Show me somebody who's been intimidated and is fearful of voting in America. Show this to me, Mr. President. Your lips are flapping, words are coming out, but it's making no sense. It's gibberish, like always. Well, if you count Democrats who still refuse to admit the 2016 election was legitimate, then that's pretty much every candidate who has an issue with the last two elections, too. What they're also trying to do here is to tie the Paul Pelosi attack to January the 6th. This is a stretch. Paulie P and his tighty-whities, and using that as a way to boost Democrat chances come Tuesday. Listen to old senile Joe try that one. Here it is.
He woke him up and he wanted to tie him up. The assailant ended up using a hammer to smash Paul's skull. Thankfully, by the grace of God, Paul survived. All this happened after the assault, and it's hard to even say. It's hard to even say. After the assailant entered the home asking, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" Those are the very same words used by the mob when they stormed the United States Capitol on January the 6th.
Joe Biden, meanwhile, says, who's the president? But again, I digress. By the way, what they should be admitting, instead of playing this January 6th card, which is absolutely inane, what they should be admitting is that violent crime is out of control all over the country. People know that. These people are manipulators of the worst kind. They accuse Republicans and regular Americans, like you and I, of one thing, like election denialism or stealing elections, yet they do that exact thing. It's a classic tool of the Democrat playbook. Accuse the other side of the crime you're committing, all tailored to, again, demoralize legitimate patriots of this country. Well, it won't work. I hate to have to do this, but here's, and I'm sorry, some of you might be having lunch, and I apologize. But here's Hillary Clinton accusing Republicans of stealing the 2024 election 2 years in advance. Go get them, Hill.
Right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election. And they're not making a secret of it. The right-wing controlled Supreme Court may be poised to rule on giving state legislatures, yes, you heard me that correctly, state legislatures the power to overturn presidential elections. Just think, if that happens, the 2024 presidential election could be decided not by the popular vote or even by the anachronistic Electoral College, but by state legislatures, many of them Republican-controlled.
You mean to tell me, Hillary, you mean to tell me that the state legislatures of the many states will be in charge of the elections for president, Senate, and representatives to the House, like it says in the United States Constitution? That's outrageous. Well, we are a republic, by the way. That's why the popular vote isn't the end-all, be-all. That's what they use in other countries where one area can rule the rest of the nation. We don't fly by those rules. But Hillary knows that. She's just doing what Democrats do, trying to manipulate uneducated Americans and their darkest impulses to win power for herself and her elitist friends. The Democrats are going to lie, and it's going to get worse after these midterms. They're going to contest the election results. They're going to say it was not fair. The ones that scream election denier all the time will be the ones screaming the election was not fair, because this will be a huge win for the Republicans, and I mean a huge win. And they're going to try to do everything they can to reduce faith in our system come the 2024 presidential elections. The campaign to demoralize you will begin in earnest Wednesday, November the 9th, after the midterms, but you must stand strong. Now, there's good news, and there is good news, because a lot of governors are going to become Republicans. A lot of state legislatures are going to turn red. Many states are going to strengthen voter ID laws and laws that do protect the sanctity and the integrity of elections at the local level, the county level, the state level, and yes, the federal level. The bottom line for all of this, you must vote. It still matters. Nothing else matters more. Don't forget to vote.